Hey, I'm Jessie. Do you believe in miracles? Well, you will after seeing these clips. Today's throwback episode shows that miracles really can happen. First up, let's watch Kaylee's story. She's 15, but looks 50 because of a rare disorder, just like Benjamin Button.
My mom had a normal, full-term pregnancy despite being older. She didn't encounter any problems, that is, until I was born. When everyone saw me, they were shocked because I looked like an 80-year-old. My skin was all wrinkly. I had a couple of white hairs on my head and 2 teeth that were decayed. Since my voice was very deep, I sounded like an old person when I cried. Instead of screaming and crying like a baby, I was moaning the way old people usually do. Tests showed that my internal organs were also worn out, just like my appearance. My heart wasn't very strong. My bones were too weak. My lungs, kidneys, liver, and all my inner organs were in really bad shape, as if they'd been used for many years. Since this was such a rare disorder, at first they couldn't figure out the reason for it. After doing intensive research, my parents learned that this was a genetic disorder, and unfortunately, there was no treatment for it. They still had lengthy conversations with experts on the subject. As a result of those conversations, they understood that the only cure for it was time. According to the doctors, there was a high probability that I would develop diabetes, hypertension, or cancer, diseases that are common among older people. However, if I could manage to stay alive, I'd go through a reverse aging process.
How would you have reacted if you found out you had this disorder? Do you think that people would treat you differently if you had grey hair and wrinkles? Find out how Kaylee's classmates reacted to her at school by watching the full episode. Kelly thinks that Kaylee shouldn't think it weird having a child when she looks the same age as them, as she thinks it would be awesome. Sathvika thinks that it doesn't matter how Kaylee looks, as she's a wonderful person regardless. Next up, let's watch Beatrice's story, who found out her dad was homeless after she moved to a new city.
One evening on my way to the shelter, I saw a man lying down on a bench. He wasn't like the other homeless people I knew. He looked really, really bad. I nudged him. He looked up at me. "I can take you somewhere where you can eat," I said. Before he could answer, he put his head down again. He closed his eyes. I repeated what I just said, but he didn't respond. I gave him whatever change I had and kept walking. The following day, I saw the same man again. This time he was sitting. He had a blank look in his eyes. I sat next to him. He didn't look at me. I asked, "Are you hungry?"
Oh.
He didn't respond. I stood up. I grabbed his arm and tried to pull him up. "Please come with me. We'll go somewhere where you can eat," I said. He stood up without saying anything. We started walking together. I was used to the way homeless people smelled, but this guy was really bad. Also, his face was so dirty you couldn't see what he looked like. It was like he was wearing a mask made out of mud with just 2 holes for the eyes. When we got to the soup kitchen, I took him to the bathroom. "You need to wash your hands. You can't eat like this," I told him. He still didn't react. I went in with him. I turned on the water. I washed his hands with soap. Then I lathered his face for a really long time. Then I rinsed it with water. When he looked up, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was my father. "Dad!" I screamed and hugged him. He didn't respond. "Dad, it's me, Beatrice, your daughter, Beatrice!" I was screaming. I finally found my dad, but he didn't seem to recognize me. He was just staring at his face in the mirror. That was probably because he was seeing his own face for the first time in years.
Pretty unbelievable, right? The link to the full video is in the description. You can see how Beatrice's dad ended up homeless, and what happened when Beatrice told her mum. Haritha is so sad to hear what happened to Beatrice's family, and Rapido hopes that one day a miracle happens to her father. Next up, a story about Isabel, who had to move in with her evil stepdad. Let's watch the moment that a miracle happens to her.
Don't even dream of going to college. You're not smart enough for that. That night I cried until morning. I had to get out of that house, but I couldn't see any way of doing that. One day, the miracle that I needed happened. My phone rang. The person on the line said, "I'm your grandmother. I would like to meet you and your mom if you let me." We met up the next day. When my dad was only 4 years old, my grandmother abandoned him. He never forgave her for that. In the years that followed, she tried to get in touch with him many times, but my dad refused to communicate with her. She told us all about this in tears. He was right because I'd left him. I have immense regret. However, unfortunately, it's not possible to turn back time. My grandmother had just recently found out that my dad had died. She thought we might be able to use some help with money, so she tracked us down and finally reached me. She told us, my second husband was very wealthy. I lost him last year. I have no one to share this fortune with. Do you want to move in with me? She asked. My mom was pregnant at that time. She said, I have a new family now, but I know Isabel is not happy. She can live with you if she likes. My grandmother seemed like a really nice person. Even if she wasn't, I'd still move in with her, since my stepfather and stepsister were making my life unbearable. I agreed right away. That night, I said goodbye to my mom and left home. My grandmother was really wealthy. She lived in a magnificent mansion. The best part was that she was even kinder than I thought. She kept telling me, I feel like I've been born again. Isabel, I'm so grateful to you for making me feel this way. I'll send you to the best schools. Eventually, all this will belong to you anyway. I didn't care about being rich. I was at peace now. And that was more valuable to me than all the money in the world.
What would you do if you found out you were going to inherit millions? Watch the full episode to see what happened when Isabel's stepdad begged for money. Both Leon Rose and Xiao Ying Lo agreed that they could never move out and leave their mum with the evil stepdad. Would you have left and moved in with your grandmother? Our final story is about Sky, who got a lifetime supply of free flights after being born mid-air. It's not airline policy to give out lifetime passes, so stay watching to find out what made Sky so special.
You may ask, what's so special about you? It's just luck, really. This man you see on the screen is the general manager of the company that owns the plane on which I was born. He is an incredibly nice person. He calls me on my birthday every year without exception. This lovely general manager and his wife weren't able to conceive for a long time. They were going through treatments for years, but nothing was working. Thankfully, his wife finally got pregnant. The rest is really interesting. This woman and my mom gave birth at the same time, down to the minute. So their daughter was born in the hospital and me on the plane at the same moment. The man was very moved by this when he found out. It can't just be a coincidence that a baby was born aboard one of our planes at the exact same time as my daughter. This is definitely a small miracle. I can't just ignore that. I want to give the baby from the plane a lifetime flight pass. But they decided to keep it a secret to prevent it from becoming part of the company policy. Otherwise, they would have to give the same present for every in-flight birth.
Pretty awesome, right? Where would be the first place you flew to if you had free flights? Watch the full episode to find out where Sky decided to go. Jay loves this story and really thinks it's magical. Emily wishes she had some of Sky's luck, as she knows how expensive travelling can be. Totally agree with you there, Emily. I hope this miracle throwback episode fills you with magic. Click the links in the description to watch all of today's full episodes, and subscribe so you never miss out on a new upload. See you next time for more stories.